Hey guys, it's Stacey Nelson from AmazingMess.com. Today I was asked a question, so why did you quit homeschooling? And I decided to answer that question, although very hesitantly. When I quit homeschooling, I really felt like I was sort of ostracized, I guess, in a way from the homeschool community. So that was kind of hard, and so that's why I really hesitated, I guess, to tell people like why we quit homeschooling. I'll tell you a little bit of the background behind all of that. So, like I've said before, we homeschooled until my daughter was in 6th grade. And that summer we bought a foreclosure. And in July we started fixing that up, and we were still working on it when we moved in August. We had to get that ready. Also about that time, I started a new part-time job as director of children's ministry at my church. And I was also dealing with a lot of chronic pain in my joints. And I'm still dealing with that today, but back then it was new and I wasn't used to it, and I didn't really know how to manage it, I guess. I don't have an official diagnosis, but I wish that I did in some ways, but they haven't been able to figure out what it is. But basically, I struggle with a lot of joint pain and muscle pain and fatigue, and my doctor, gastrointestinal issues, and my doctor thinks that something autoimmune is going on. Anyway, so all of that was going on. I was really having kind of a bad flare up of that, and I was just tired. Like I was so tired. I was overwhelmed. I was burnt out, and we had only started back to homeschooling, and it was October. And I remember that I started like searching the internet for terms like I hate homeschooling and can I quit homeschooling? And I thought, why am I doing this? Like, I'm an adult. If this isn't working, then we need to figure something else out. But the problem is that I'm really stubborn. And even though I said we would take it year by year, I don't think I really believed that. I thought I was going to homeschool through high school. And so I really felt like a failure. And I didn't really want to give up that dream, I guess. But I knew something had to change because I just did not like the person that I was. I could not handle everything that was going on. I was so overwhelmed. I had taken on too much. And I was just at a point with my oldest daughter that our relationship was really actually being damaged by homeschooling at that point. And so I knew that something had to change. So I talked to my husband about it. We talked to a few other people and decided that we would look into a school option at semester. So the really cool thing is that we have this great private Christian school that's about 10 miles from our house, and it's pretty inexpensive. Really, all 3 of the girls could go for about the price of one student for a whole year at a private school in a bigger community near us. So it really was inexpensive as far as private schools go. And when we went and visited there, it kind of felt, I can't explain it except that I just felt a peace, and it felt like a family, and it felt right. So then I came back home and told my husband about it. And another cool thing that happened is we got a check that we'd been waiting for a while, and I started to wonder if it was even coming, but it came like the weekend after I visited. And so I just thought, this is perfect because it exactly covered what we needed to pay for them to go to school for that semester. And then also around that time, I read an article in a homeschool magazine that was called The Day I Quit Homeschooling. And it was basically about this mom's journey. She quit homeschooling for a year, and then she came back to it. And I mean, it turned out fine, and she learned a lot of things through that. And I just felt like all of that was kind of confirmation to me that it was okay, that I could go ahead and do that. But I will tell you that it really was one of the hardest decisions that I made, because I felt like I was giving up. I felt like I was failing. And again, I'm stubborn and I didn't want to do that. So it was a really hard decision, but I really did learn a lot through that semester. And so I have a couple of things I was going to share with you that I learned that semester. So number one, homeschooling had become an idol. So quite literally, homeschooling had become my identity. I called myself a homeschool mom. I lived homeschooling. I breathed homeschooling. It was what I did. And when it was stripped away, when it was taken away, I felt lost. And that's when I realized that it really had become an idol to me. And I also had started to think of it as a savior. Like, I had started to homeschool out of fear. And that was not my intent when we set out at the journey. I just wanted to provide an education and have time with my girls. And when I realized I was homeschooling out of fear, then I realized that I couldn't control all the variables, and I needed to let some of that go and trust that God would provide, and rely on Him instead of myself so much. The second thing I learned is that my kids were just fine. I was concerned, like, are they going to be able to do the work? I mean, they were going from the curriculum we had done into Abeka, and I knew that Abeka was sort of a lot more bookish, or just a lot more than they had been doing, and they did really well. They did fine. They're great readers, and they caught on to how you do school really quickly, and they were able to succeed well. So the first few weeks were difficult, but they adapted pretty quickly, and they learned to do worksheets with the best of them, that's for sure. So the third thing is that I needed to simplify. So I'm somewhat of a perfectionist, and I was trying to fit way too much into our homeschool day. And that was a lot of why I was burning out. I was trying so hard to cover everything that it was making me crazy. And I just needed to simplify. I needed to cut back on what we were doing, do fewer things, and just work on that. And so I was really burnt out, and I was trying to make everything too complicated. So I figured out quickly that I needed to simplify. The fourth thing that I really enjoyed about my homeschool sabbatical, that's what I called that time, was that I was able to just be mom for a little bit. I didn't have to be teacher, especially for my older daughter. I could just be mom, and it was actually really healing for our relationship for that to occur, because I asked her if I could talk about it, and I think I talked about it in the last video, but we just had some struggles, and they were not being resolved, and our relationship was really headed to not a good place. Whereas I wanted homeschooling to be about relationship and to really strengthen our relationship for the two of us, it just wasn't working. And what I learned is that that's okay. Like, every child is different. So that's the fifth thing. Every child is different, and it's okay. Maybe some kids don't do best in a homeschool environment, but maybe your other children do. So this year, we finally have decided, but my oldest daughter is going back to school, and then my two younger ones are coming back to homeschooling. And that's because each of them is different. And next year it could change, you know. Maybe they'll all go back to school. Maybe they'll all want to go back to that school, or maybe just one of them will want to homeschool, or maybe one of them will want to do a virtual school so they can do sports at the middle school or high school. I don't know. The thing that I learned about quitting homeschool is that I can be much more flexible, and I don't have to worry so much, and I don't have to live in fear. Because while school is not perfect, neither is homeschooling. We live in a fallen world, and not everything can go the way that you planned or hoped, but we're still going to do the best that we can with where we are at the moment. So anyway, those are just a few things that I learned when we quit homeschooling. Would I do it again? I would do it again. I felt like it really allowed me to be less rigid in my thinking. I had gotten so rigid and this way is the only way that I couldn't see any other options. And that semester was hard. I felt like the death of a dream basically is what happened that semester, and I realized a lot of things. I learned a lot about myself and how easily I get into thinking really structured and only believing that I can do things a certain way. And it was not a good place to be. But so I've appreciated looking at things in a different way. Anyway, I would encourage you, I really do think that sticking with homeschooling, because there are really hard times, and I think that sticking with it is usually the best route. But also if things work out a different way, if God calls you to something else, if your path is different, then explore that path. So that's a little bit about why we quit homeschooling. We're not stuck with that. If you quit, you can always go back. It doesn't lock you into anything. And that's probably one of the biggest things I learned, is just to be more flexible in my thinking. So anyway, that is all that I have for today. I hope that you have a great day and go make some memories with your kids.